So welcome back, everybody. This is episode 7 of the Trade Squad. We are on part 4, and Leah is now back and has joined us for part 4 of episode 7 because we're talking about a subject near and dear to her heart, something she deals with on a day-to-day basis, and that's professional development and how to choose the best training and upgrade options. Because it's January, it's the beginning of a brand new year. What a great way to start then with this topic. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Leah. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, well, here's the thing that I'm really interested in. I want to see more professional development take into consideration the gray areas, if you will, those new and emerging skill sets that maybe are not fully baked, but we know are coming. And I think of that along with digital trade. So one of the things that I'm trying to do that I would be curious to hear your thoughts on is I'm actually taking this request to some of our professional development partners and saying, hey, you're not doing any training on e-commerce and its impact really yet. We have experts in my office who could sort of validate some of the content. Would you be open to developing that? And can we add that as another vertical, if you will, to the training series? And we've gotten good response, but I don't know if you guys have had similar questions or even approached any of your professional development partners around that subject. But to me, that's what I'm going to strive for in 2020, not to be afraid to say, okay, yeah, you've got the content, but have we considered this?
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. And I think we also have to take into account how people are learning these days. Right? I just did an episode with Howard Berg, who's like the world records fastest reader. And the reason why I did that is because he talks about speed reading and speed learning, because we're so overwhelmed by content. So it's not just about the professional development, it's that we're overwhelmed with content on a day-to-day basis, and then you add professional development on top of that. And I don't know about you, but some days I'm just like, my brain is on fire and I need to just decompress and watch something or listen to something that doesn't, really make me think all the time. And so I think we also need to think about how we're learning. I think micro learning as well, or giving the tools like maybe speed learning, being able to absorb things a little bit faster, easier. I don't know. Those are the types of things that I'm thinking about because I'm on the board of directors for FIT, the Forum for International Trade Training. So when I'm thinking about what we're doing and I'm thinking about the professional development that we're putting out there, we have courses, we have the path to the designation, but then we also have the workshops. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I think that that's a great way to really hone in on the ways different people learn. Right? Some people don't want a full-blown course. They want a workshop. They want a smaller workshop. But to your point, we also need to make sure that these courses and workshops are based around real-life business, such as e-commerce, the different aspects of e-commerce. Like, it's a huge part of business. Returns. We need some courses on returns. Like, it's a huge
not just a piece of paper.
Huh? Sorry, Audrey?
Not just like a slide in the course that there are returns. No. What do you do with them? They just keep coming back. What happens now?
How do you manage them effectively? How do you not lose money on inventory when the product comes back and you can reuse it? Or when can you reuse it?
It's such a good point because, starting next year or so in just a few days, our initiative for small business has to coordinate all of these different training elements. So there's a form of professional development baked into that. And then alongside that, we're trying to, of course, coordinate with our educators at the college campuses to make sure that they're aware of this. And to your point around what are the different types of ways people learn, totally agree. And I also think part of the challenge there is those who provide the training sort of have, well, we've always done it this way mentality, Maybe at most you could come to a workshop and or a webinar, or quite frankly, even at a conference, there's no actionable follow-up every time. So you feel like, well, now what? I'm really interested in digital badging or micro-credentials as an example for how people can start to accrue skill sets over time that culminate in maybe a formal designation. And similar to FITT, I'm on the board for NASBITE, sort of the sister organization here, and have been pushing really hard to say, what are we doing in the digital trade space? You know, how are we going to evolve that and make sure that that's a piece of our training we provide?
I think it's important too, because a lot of the training is almost foundational as well. Like a lot of the aspects that you see are very foundational. So I've done my FIT, I have my FIT designation. I've done some courses at college. I've looked at other certificates. And then, I mean, there's a difference between, like, I've looked at doing maybe my customs license. It maybe fits for my business. And that's a whole kind of, like, the licensing is a separate segment. But at this point, I've been in my job about 15 years. And in logistics and customs about 6. And it's, you know, I'm not, you know, maybe right now I'm going to take a break and, you know, kind of work on maybe other aspects of learning. But in 10 years, in 5 to 10 years, what certification is going to line up for me? Because I'm not going to be looking at a foundational. Like, I've been in this business for a while. And I think there's kind of a gap at this point of, okay, you've been in it for 15 years. Here's how, you know, and the industry has changed from, for me, I mean, I'm not, my generation isn't digital native. You know, it's digital is coming a little bit later. So for this generation, what's my next training level, right? Whereas for people who are, you know, a younger generation, what's going to be their next training level in 10 years? So I think there's that gap too between foundational and you know, intermediate, and then to experienced in a certain aspect of the business, but I have no concept of what AI is or how that's going to affect me or my business or how I could use it. So then who do I go to for that?
Well,
so, yeah, I feel the gap.
That's a really good point. And I want to sort of bring up, you know, I think we need to start being more forward thinking for our professional development customers. And what I mean by that is we need to start realizing what the skills are going to be needed in a specific sector for maybe people that are in your position, Audrey, or maybe for somebody who is in warehousing. You know, what is it that I need to be striving for and looking for as a skill for future development and improvement, right? Not just right now. I think that that's really going to be a huge, huge deal. Like, it's going to be something that we really, really need to think about, and not just the individual. And the other thing that I'm going to throw out there is, Leah, you brought up a good point about follow-up. How do people want to be held accountable for what they're learning? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I think that we need to be responsible for that. If we're somebody that puts on a conference that's putting out really, really great content, well, instead of just sending the PowerPoint over to them again, how are we, what do people want to see as a follow-up? Not just how we've done it in the past, right? Like, as I go to conferences and they're like, oh, we'll send you the PowerPoint. Well, what does that do for me? I don't get the rest of it that goes along with it that I learned and what that person said and all that kind of stuff. I don't know what those answers are, but I think that those are two fundamentally flawed issues within our professional development arena, I think. I don't know, Leah, what do you think?
Well, I think you're right on point. And there's two things that I'm hoping evolve over this project we're working on over the next year. One is what we call cross competencies, right? And especially in the college system and this idea of training for a job, it's been very linear. So you come in, you get your culinary certificate, say, and you acquire a certain set of skills and you leave, and that is the job you can get. That's a challenge and less empowering if you will inevitably have to pivot to a different role. And, you know, in a lot of ways, it sends you back to the starting line to add those new skills. So what I'm really interested in, and I think this is where tech, AI, digital, et cetera, is really about those fundamental skill sets that you'll need no matter what type of role you go into. And then, as Audrey mentioned, when you want to start enhancing what you have as your base, are there ways that you can sort of grab these specific skills and add this to your competency, but have it recognized in a way that employers, partners, et cetera, see, and they're like, okay, Audrey knows that. I know I could bring her in to participate in that. So that's one thing I'm really interested in. The other, I think, around conferences and things like that is access. What I found really fascinating is we did the Get Global conference in Long Beach in November, really well attended, and we had a lot of faculty who, for professional development reasons, said, what's the follow-up? What do we do next? And the thing they asked for most is they said, I sat in the conference, the content was fascinating, but I never talked to people in that space in my day-to-day. Is there a way to create access points? So we're talking right now about quarterly webinars or conversations like this, where people can at least even remotely get together and say, here's my questions. I loved your content. Now, how do I implement that in a way that's meaningful?
Well, and whoever's listening, and if you want to pass this on, because I do a question of the week every week on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. If they have any questions that they want to put out to the community, please have them send them to me, because I would love to, utilize those as questions to the community and help get some feedback and the conversation going. Just so you know, for your reference, if they do have any of those questions, send them my way. But I think you're right as far as, the cross competencies. So I know that I've talked in the past, or we've talked in the past, about companies really getting behind, cross training. But it's not top of mind. It's not something that companies really want to do. The employees want to do it, but I find that sometimes with the employers, they're struggling a little bit. Because the work needs to get done, and do we have enough people to maybe cover different things like that? So I think if there's a way that individuals can take it upon themselves to get that cross competency or that cross training outside of their employer, I think that would be huge. Like, that's a really, really great point.
Absolutely. The cross training is good. I mean, there are some people who just like their jobs and they don't really want to know anything else. I mean, there's not everyone's going to want to do professional development. They don't think it matters. So that's not really the core group we're talking to here. We are talking about people who are ambitious and who want to learn more, and lifelong learners want to get ahead. And yeah, it always kind of comes back to that conversation of how does this academic world who manages our education piece and manages our training piece, or these associations who do that, actually connect with people who are doing the work and out in the field, and the conference follow-up, even from having, because you sometimes don't have time to connect with the person who's done the presentation either. So sometimes it'd be nice if they did, a month later, doing an Ask Me Anything, or, if you had a specific situation at your work, and without, displaying confidentiality or that, but able to present it so that then the speaker can kind of assess your case study or your experience, and not necessarily because as much as we think, my project is completely unique and special and no one's ever done this before, it's not. And so are there people who can talk to or can speak to that, pull out, here's my direct experience, but really what are the fundamentals that are happening here? What are the key milestones that are all the same that we're all dealing with, and how can we overcome them or be more effective or be more efficient? But it's, who can manage that? Which association, which educational partner? Right? So
that's the challenge. I mean, that's the big challenge. And that's a tough one because, I think we're not really prepared for the way, like Sarah mentioned earlier, the way people learn. And, today you can find most information online. So why do we continue to follow this traditional method of what is validated and what isn't in terms of knowledge acquisition, right? So it's something that I think would be a really interesting conversation over the course of the next year as we hear all these experts on this podcast is a perfect example, or the Q&A that Sarah offers is another perfect example. If people are acquiring this information, what are we looking at up ahead in terms of how we acknowledge that and how we define skills attainment in a way that's actually useful? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, and how are we using social platforms? Like with the question of the week that I asked, I think the question I had a few weeks ago had 90 comments. I mean, if you're an association or, somebody that's putting out knowledge-based content, go through those comments, see what people are, how they're thinking, what they're talking about, what they're, how they're answering the question. And you might be able to find some pretty good answers there, right? Because you'll be able to see maybe patterns and, what people are predicting for the future and what they're thinking that they're going to need. And that gives you all the information that you need. I just think sometimes we're not doing the research.
But I love Leah's point about like the micro and the badges too, because like, I see friends getting badges for drinking beer at a certain place, but it's like, I've seen all of Sarah's Let's Talk Supply Chain podcast on my resume, right?
Oh, do you want me to make a badge for that?
Maybe.
Badge
right? Like you can't all watch the Trade Squad and then be like, I listen to Audrey every Trade Squad.
Right.
So I know everything about complaining about cold calls and being a Twitter star. Right?
Yeah,
so it does come down to how, like, you have this knowledge and you have all this content. A lot of it's free, which is great for people who are getting started and who don't have a lot of cash to invest in their education. And, you don't want to go into crazy debt for it. There is a lot of free stuff, but it's true. How does your employer be able to look at your resume, which they only want like one page now? It's all pulled out by algorithms. If you have the wrong spelling on your name, you're totally out anyways. But how do they find it, right? How do we, it's so.
Okay, but that's a really good point.
Badge primarily.
That is a really good point. Because I was just talking to somebody about one of the certifications and how I could keep the certification, because I was like 30 hours. Like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do for 30 hours. Right. And I don't know if I have 30 hours, let's be honest, right? But then they told me, because of everything that I'm doing at conferences and podcasts and all of that contributes to it. But I'm kind of like, how would you know? I mean, unless I'm in the agenda for a conference, fine. I mean, that I do the podcast every week, right? Like, but that's me. I mean, if you're listening to the podcast, how would I know and how could I attribute that to the 30 hours that I need to keep my certificate? You're completely right. And I need to look into this. I need to figure out.
I think that's a great question for the Trade Squad to look at, because I look at LinkedIn as a really popular platform for categorizing your skill sets, right? And I had the same challenge. I had done a TEDx talk. I had manufactured my own product and, distributed overseas. There's nothing on LinkedIn that I can use to say, hey, these are skill sets I have. Maybe we should kind of start talking with our guests. Like, what are the categories that we want to add that we know bring value from an employability place?
Because LinkedIn doesn't have, like, I've been interviewed for things and I had to make it up as like a project, because LinkedIn gives you like certificate project. So maybe we need to call LinkedIn. Because they don't.
Well, okay.
I did an interview. It was cool. I sent it to my grandparents. I want to put that on LinkedIn.
So I need to also talk to YouTube, because every time they watch the Trade Squad, a badge needs to be like either, it needs to come out of their computer at them so that they can like hold it up, or it needs to come by email. I don't know. Like, this is you have just given me an Oprah aha moment. And I am all over this 2020.
No, it's really true. So our organization for the state is called the California International Trade Center, right? And so we work with students as part of the effort with small business to give students the opportunity to have firsthand experience with small business, right? And what the students are doing is digital trade related. So they're doing online marketing strategies for these companies, assessing their global footprint, those types of things. We want to create a badge for the students so that they have a digital portfolio that shows some sort of accreditation isn't the right word, but acknowledgement of what these students have accomplished. And I think you're absolutely spot on. You could come up with one for the Trade Squad. And I'll say this, because I have met with LinkedIn on this issue before. You can display those icons. So we have this little round, logo. And it is now a digital icon. And what LinkedIn will allow you to do is to display it. But ultimately, that should be something that when you click on it, the associated skill sets come up with a link that would take you to that host organization. So that becomes the validator. And then we can dispense with this need for a formal degree. You can go through that icon to identify the skill sets and then the entity that provided those skills. So yes, Trade Squad, you should do this.
Yeah.
2020.
Okay, I need to figure this out because seriously, I want people to get badges for listening to the show. I mean, you spend 40 minutes listening to an episode of the podcast or 20 minutes now watching, a part of one of the Trade Squad episodes. I want to be able to give somebody something that shows that they've done that and they've spent the time and, that they've learned something from it because, it's all value. It's all information. We're all learning from each other.
100%. This has been around for a while. Mozilla Backpack started this back in, I want to say like 2005, probably 2010 was when I started looking at what digital badging could mean. And I will say this, Trade Squad, for your consideration, because we'll be doing the same thing. We don't want to see sort of a dearth of digital badges all over the place. And now I get them for, navigating the grocery store parking lot successfully. You want to make sure that there's some validity to it. And the way that we've seen most of these agencies utilize badging in a meaningful way beyond what I just shared around clicking through skills attainment, et cetera, is some sort of a quiz or some sort of example of proficiency. So I would say that's probably the biggest challenge is who authorizes that proficiency assessment, and then who will then, review it and say, yes, indeed, you have achieved these skill sets. So that's the one little niggling detail. But as you gain credibility with your network of employers, for example, and Trade Squad is a recognized authority, then you have the opportunity to create an assessment, review it, and then authorize that digital badge.
Can you hear? Can you hear the wheels turning?
I can.
I think they're pretty loud. Oh, right. Well, that has given me a lot of work to do. Thank you, Leah. I got to look into this. And you and I need to talk about this a little bit more because I think we're on to something.
Yeah. I mean, think about how much more empowering that is. That's the thing to me, like and I hate to preach about the college system, but if this becomes the entry point for true economic mobility, that is knowledge attainment. And we have to go beyond these traditional sort of old-fashioned ways of looking at what indeed recognizes skill sets. And digital badging to me is the highway, the next evolution of recognizing that and empowering people to do more.
Yes, it is the hyperloop of education.
Elon Musk, please, I hope you're listening and you will sponsor our badging. We could use the investment.
Yes, Elon Musk, we are here. The Trade Squad. All right, well, that wraps up part 4 of episode 7. Leah, thank you so much. We're so glad that you were here for this one. You have opened up a whole new world for all of us, I think, especially me, and I'm going to be running to try to figure out how to do this. And Audrey, once again, thank you so much for joining us for all 4 parts of episode 7, and we will see you guys, I think, in March.